Um, Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, no matter where you're from. This is the wonders of the internet. I don't know where I'm broadcasting to other than the world. So great to be back and talking about that. Please let us know where you're from. Always great to get an understanding of where you're from and who's joining. We are here today to talk about one of the most important things that I have found in the last 20, well, not the last 20 years, last 10 years. So the biggest thing that I'm going to be sharing with you of what I've learned in the last 10 years. But before we do that, please let us know where you're from. It would be great to start to get a picture of what the audience is like. And by the way, for the person that asked the best question of the day, in the next 30 minutes, I'm going to be giving you a copy of my latest book, Happy Employees Make Happy Customers. Best question, I'm going to look down all the questions at the end of the day, and then I'll contact you for the most incisive question that I think you've got coming up. The other thing that we're going to be doing on this show in the future is we're going to be having some guests come along next week, next Monday, which is when we're trying to focus ourselves to. Next Monday, we've got a guy coming on to talk about measurement and customer in the online space, measurement of customer emotions in the online arena. So I'm going to start to go through and see if we've got any people from different places, which I think we have. So we've got Julia from Australia. Wow, that's halfway around the world. I was only over there this time last year, actually, October, November. We've got Eduardo from Portugal, Mohammed from Egypt, Kathy from Minnesota, Miguel from New York City. So getting around the whole world. David from Italy. So great to have you all on board. As I said to you today, we're going to be talking a bit about this. Let me do this. In fact, I've got to, that's what I've got to do, isn't it? I've got to share my screen. So bear with me 1 second whilst I make the technology work. There we go. So we're going to be talking a bit today about the biggest thing I've learned in the last 10 years. And I'm going to be going through this. So just to sort of position things again for people, the key thing here is we're talking about this in the context of marketing, customer experience, and we're talking this in the context of, you know, for those of you that have been regular viewers of the show, we've got the conscious experience, the things that you're aware of, and the rational experience. That's where most organizations spend most of their time, is looking at that conscious part of an experience. And we like to depict that in this iceberg that you can see here. But actually what drives that iceberg, and as we know, you know, the majority of the iceberg is underwater, is an emotional, subconscious and psychological experience. And this bit about psychology, I'm going to be talking about one particular part of psychology today that is quite fascinating for me. And if you're interested in all of this, we do a weekly podcast called The Intuitive Customer. And I do that with the co-author of my last book, a guy called Professor Ryan Hamilton, that's been on the show a couple of times. So we are. So let me sort of jump into this and start explaining this. So the biggest thing I've learned in the last 10 years is this effectively. It's the importance of memory. Okay, and now this is quite subtle in their approach. So let me try and sort of put this in your mind, if I may, over the next 30 minutes. When you think about your memory, when you think about your life, okay, You know, all of that has been built up over a period of time. The expectations that you have, the values that you hold, the way that you act, what you do and how you do it, you know, has all been built up through experiences, has been built up through teachings, learnings that you've learned from your parents and other people and your teachers and in business over a period of time. But clearly, for any of that lot to have an effect, it's got to be held in your memory. Okay. And therefore, when you start to think about it, memories shape us. Okay. That, you know, they shape who we are and what we believe in. Okay. Now, one of the reasons why we talked a bit about this sort of subconscious psychological part here is that, you know, this goes to the heart of who we are. So your customers are doing things, and, you know, here's the issue. As long as your customers are human beings, then all of this lot applies. Your customers are doing things to you. Yeah. Or you're doing things to your customers, and they're reacting effectively because of the memories that they have. So when you start to think about it, customer loyalty is a function of memory. Yeah. So think about being loyal. What does that mean? What that means is that if you're loyal to somebody, it means that you remember that sort of past interaction. You can't, by definition, be loyal to something that you've never experienced, you've never even heard of, because by definition you wouldn't have remembered it, and therefore you can't be loyal to it. So loyalty is a function of memory. Okay. So let's go. Let me try and dig down into this, because again, from a customer experience perspective, from a marketing perspective, if you're dealing in sales, any of this becomes critically important to you. And just to name check a few other people, we have Siam from the UK, Abdullah from Turkey, I hope you're well, Jamal from Italy, Katrika from India, Bino from India, Danny from Ireland, so over to sunny Ireland. I hope you're not getting as much rain as we seem to be getting in the UK at the moment. I'll be glad to get back home to Sarasota at the end of this week. Lance from Kansas City. We have and Solomon from Senegal. So, wow, I think we're hitting all of the continents around the world. So let's talk a bit about, you know, this piece here, which is, if you're starting to think about customer memory, okay, then memories are really, you know, the ones that you remember are emotional, okay? So on the picture you can see here on the far left, this is me with my kids when they were young. As you can see, I was a lot younger then. We used to go and watch the England soccer team play. And I was in Germany with my family the night that they won they won a game against, or World Cup qualifier against Germany 5-1, which was very memorable for us because we never normally beat Germany. And I'm also a great fan of Apple. So you know, it was all of those experiences. And if you think about in your life and you think about the most memorable experiences that you've had, they tend to be highly emotional. Okay. And by the way, just as a reminder, for those of you that want to ask a question, I'm going to be giving away a free ebook for the person that asked the best question. Free ebook called "Happy Employees Make Happy Customers." So please put that your question in the comments, and I'll come back afterwards, and I'll send you a copy of. For the best question, I'll send a copy of my latest book. So memories are really important for that reason, and therefore emotional memories are important. So and why does that sort of fit here? Well, if you think about it, if I'm fishing in Florida, this is a picture of me fishing in Florida, and let's assume that I want to buy some tackle. And I then start to think, well, okay, where shall I go and buy this tackle from? And I decide that I'm going to go and buy the tackle from my favorite store, a place called Discount Tackle. Now, why do I go to Discount Tackle? Because the experience is better. Okay, I could go to Dick's, which is a large sort of warehouse sports store, cheap fishing gear. I could go to Bass Pro Shops, but Discount Tackle, I have to pass both of these places to go to it. But in addition to that, the experience that I've got from them in the past, talking to the guys there about fishing, talking to them about what the best tackle is to buy, has been far better. Okay, so the point here is, and this is a really, really, really key point that I want to emphasize with you. The point here is, we don't choose between memories. We don't choose between experiences. We choose between the memory of those experiences. Okay. Now let me say that again, because I really want this to sink in with you. We don't choose between experiences. We choose between the memory of those experiences. So when you're choosing where to go to buy clothes, when you're choosing which website to go on to, do whatever, which restaurant to go to, you're choosing from a memory. Okay. You're choosing from a memory of that last experience, or what you think that the new place is going to be like. So this is a really key point for me. You don't choose between experiences. We choose between the memory of those experiences. Now, that's not my phrase. That's a phrase by a guy called Professor Daniel Kahneman. And Professor Daniel Kahneman has won the Nobel Prize for behavioral economics. And he's written some really good books. One is called Thinking Fast and Slow. And what Kahneman talks about is the fact that we have two selves. Okay. We have the experiencing self, which is you here today, this very second. That's the experiencing self. And we have the remembering self. Okay. And that's what you remember of this. So if somebody says to you tomorrow, hey, I gather you were on that LinkedIn Live with Colin. What was it like? You're not going to remember the 30 minutes that we're going to have together. You're going to remember parts of it. Okay. Well, what parts of it? Okay. Well, I guess the parts you're going to remember are the parts that are most impactful for you. Okay. So we have the experiencing self, you here now, and we have the remembering self. And when you go to choose where to go in the future, part of that decision, a large part of that decision, will be from that remembering self. So understanding that memory becomes an important aspect of things. In fact, Sadiq says, why would we want to create, says that's why we should create memorable experiences. Yes, that's absolutely right. Creating a memorable experience is the key here, which is important. So experiencing self, remembering self. Now, what Kahneman goes on to talk about is this. What he goes on to talk about is the fact that memories are formed by what he calls the peak end rule. Okay. And by the way, at the end of this, we are going to make these slides available for people. So if you want to download the slides, then please just go to here, beyondphilosophy.com/live, and you'll be able to get the copy of these slides. So what Kahneman talks about is what we remember in an experience is we remember the peak end rule. So what he says what we remember is the peak emotion that we felt, and we remember the end emotion that we felt in an experience. So when you're buying some clothes, when you're at a restaurant, when you're at a theater, what will form that memory is what the peak emotion is and what the end emotion is. Okay. And that's really important. So, if you think about the last time you went to the cinema, I went to the cinema at the weekend, in fact, to see the Joker, the new film out. And the ending is dramatic. I won't tell you what the ending is, but it's dramatic. And it evokes an emotion. If you think about, most movies end up on a high, okay, with that warm, fuzzy feeling. If you think about anything that's happened over that, that's significant to you, you remember the peak emotion and you remember the end emotion. So why is this important? Well, this is important because what it starts to raise are some really important questions that drive all of this stuff. So the really important questions, for example, are if memories are formed by the peak end rule, what's the peak emotion and the end emotion? The question is, what are the emotions that your customers are feeling? So at the peak, first of all, where is the peak emotion being felt in your experience? Do you know? Okay. So where's the peak emotion being felt during your experience? And where's the end emotion being felt? Okay. Now, clearly, well, it's at the end, but where is the end? Because some ends go on for some time. And more importantly, is the emotion that your customers are feeling the emotion that you want them to feel? And is it the emotion that drives most value for you? Okay. So in other words, are you evoking the emotion that you have deliberately chosen that will drive value for you, that will drive ROI for you? Okay. Because that's what you should be doing. You should be looking at driving the experience that drives or driving the emotion that drives most value for you. So again, we're going to be getting close to some questions. So please, if you've got any questions, then please put them in the chat. I'm going to be going down the list of questions after this, and I'll be sending a copy of my latest ebook, Happy Employees Make Happy Customers, to whoever asks the best question. So it looks like we've got a couple of questions here. Let's stop and answer those, should I say, rather than ask them. In fact, let me just put this on there. Whoops. Okay. So let's. Pooja says, "How do we explain explains differences between retained verbal memory and lost visual memory? She remembers emotions but not the scene." So that's a good question. So the interesting thing with memory is memories can be altered. Okay, memories can decay. Okay. And therefore, so it's a bit like, and part of your question there, if you think back to, so let me give you an example of this actually. Yesterday we had a family lunch, so we had all my kids around. We had and my grandchildren now, so big family lunch, and what's gone down in folklore is my son bought himself a hat, a sort of sun visor hat that had a little fan in it. Okay, when he was about 10. Okay, and we must refer to that story every time we meet. Okay, now the point I'm trying to make is that story has blown up out of all proportion to what it was actually like at the time. All right. And therefore that story effectively has been embellished. It's been exaggerated. It was far larger, far funnier than anything else. And I'm sure everybody listening to this podcast, sorry, not a podcast. I thought I was sort of doing one of my podcasts. But anybody listening to this live event would relate to that. Okay, you think about vacations, etc. So the same applies. What happens with memories is they can fade. Every time we think of a new memory or we recall a memory, we're reinforcing it. But here's the issue: we're also changing it. Okay. Now, therefore, think about customer complaints. Okay. So a customer complaint is typically something clearly has gone wrong. And therefore the customer is likely to be feeling, important thing again, an emotion, some form of negative emotion. And typically what happens is the organization asks them to repeat the complaint 3 or 4 times, or they ask them to tell them what the complaint is and then write the complaint down. And what the point I'm trying to make is we're reinforcing and making the customer feel even more negative towards us by doing that. Okay, I've got a question here. How do we consciously differentiate between the memory and the experiencing self? So you've used an important word there, which is how do we consciously? And the answer is we don't consciously. Okay, this is the whole thing about the whole area of psychology. You're not conscious of, in other words, you're not aware of a number of the things that you're doing. Okay. So if I said to you, think about the fact that you're breathing. Okay. So now you start to think, oh yeah, I just breathed in and I've just breathed out. Okay. So you weren't conscious of the fact that you were breathing. It just happens. And that's where the whole of sort of psychology comes in. And that's the things that we talk about on the podcast, the intuitive customer. And the reason we called it the intuitive customer, which means, that you're doing these things automatically without thinking about them. Okay. Another good question. How do we utilize a customer's bad experiences and convert them into a positive memory for the customer's benefit? So good question. The way that we have to do that is to accept the fact that there was this negative emotion that the customer's feeling, but now to try to convert that, bearing in mind that I've said that you can recall a memory and that memory is then saved. How do we get it resaved as something more positive? Well, one of the ways we can do that is by acting quickly. Okay, so if a customer complains to you, and you do or say something, if you ask them to go through 20-step process to get their complaint resolved, that's going to be a negative experience. If they turn around to you and say, let me give you an example of this. I ordered something electronic from Amazon a couple of years ago now, and it was the first time that I'd ordered something from Amazon that hadn't worked. So plugged in this piece of electronics and it hadn't worked. And I thought to myself, this is going to be a nightmare. I'm going to have to send it back to them. They're going to want proof that it didn't work. They're going to start to say, well, if, maybe I did something wrong or whatever. And I thought this is going to be a nightmare. So got on Amazon, typed in that this didn't work. They came back to us virtually straight away and said, we're very sorry to hear about that. We've put a new whatever it was, I can't remember what it was, speaker or something, in the post to you. And please, could you send back the other one, within the next 30 days? Okay. So they didn't even ask what had happened. They didn't ask for proof it was wrong. They didn't say, can you send the product back? And then as soon as we get it, we'll send you another one. They turned that into a positive experience. And they turn that into a positive memory. And I'm telling you about it. Okay. So again, every time I'm now telling people about it, I'm thinking, yeah, that was a good experience, wasn't it? Yeah. So that's reinforcing those memories. So as we bring this to a close, if there's any other questions, then please let us know. I'm going to come up with a summary. I'm just going to change this over to tell you two things. If you want to download these slides, then the slides are going to be available at this website, beyondphilosophy.com/live. If you want to listen to our podcast where we talk about all this stuff and this psychology stuff and how it applies to a customer experience, then just go to beyondphilosophy.com/podcasts. So let's try and summarize this. So key issue here. What customers tell you and what customers do can be very different. So one of the things you need to think about is, what emotions are you trying to evoke in your customers? Okay. Have you got a clear picture of the emotions that you're trying to evoke in your customers? Because go back to Kahneman's peak end rule, the memories are formed by the peak emotion and the end emotion. So key question becomes, what is the peak emotion that your customers are feeling? Where are you evoking that emotion? And does that emotion drive value? Same applies to the end. You know, where's the end? What's the end emotion you're evoking in your customers? Is that the one you want? And does it drive value? And once you've done that, and once you start to work out those questions, then what you can do is you can start to design your experience to evoke those emotions. Okay. And that then sort of follows on to the last bit of the jigsaw puzzle, which is what you now need to start to look at doing is, okay, so we now understand these things. How do we design that experience? But how do we measure that? Okay. And as I said to you, next week, next Monday at noon EST, we've got a guy called Zetcho Dobrev, who's part of the Beyond Philosophy team. And I've asked him to come on, and we're going to talk about measuring customers' emotions online. Okay, so as everybody moves into sort of digital transformation and tries to move into providing a more digital experience, you know, the measurement becomes a bit more, measurement of emotions becomes a bit more problematic. So how do we measure customer emotions in the online space? And Lance says, so discount tackle tribe engages customers better than mass market Bass Pro. For me, they do. Absolutely. It's classic stuff. It's a much more personalized service. It's not big box. And what drives value for me is that more personalized service, that more advice on what tackle to buy, etc., etc. May not be for another segment of customers. Another segment of customers, it may be more important to buy the cheapest tackle possible. So again, it comes down to, your use of tribe is an interesting one. Which tribe are you in, or which segment are you in? But what both of those start to talk about is customer behavior and understanding behavior. Okay, so and that for me goes back to the iceberg that we started this presentation off with. In fact, let me quickly go back there. So the important part here is that you're understanding that you press the wrong one, but you're understanding not just the conscious part, the bit above the water level, not just the rational part, which is effectively what customers are doing, but you're starting to understand underneath the waterline why they're doing it. Yeah, because of how they're feeling, because of the subconscious parts of your experience. And what I mean by that is the subconscious messages that you're giving. So you go into a bank and they put pens on chains. That's a subconscious message. And also this whole area of psychology. Okay, so that's really important as well. So hope this has been useful today. Thank you very much for dialing in today. Next week, as I say, we're going to be talking about how to measure customers' emotions, and I look forward to talking to you then. If you've got any questions, then as I say, put them in the comments. and look forward to talking to you next week. Thanks very much for your time. Bye-bye.